A woman grew out of the well in Saishu village. But she had no limbs, only a lonely head and upper body floating on the water. At first, people were very scared and no one dared to approach. Until one rainstorm, the pool was washed away and the woman fell out. The stunningly beautiful face was placed in front of everyone. That night, my brother took a few brothers and went to the well quietly. My brother didn't come back until the early morning of the next day. He was tying his belt while walking. He kicked me in the stomach and I knelt on the spot in pain. The scene I just saw with my own eyes instantly appeared in my mind. The woman in the well was fished out by them. The severe pain of tearing her scalp made her scream. But my brother was not afraid but looked even more excited. It's a pity that she has no lower body when she looks so beautiful. One of the men was full of regret. Perhaps she realized what was going to happen. Her expression was tinged with fear, and the next second my brother pried her mouth open, and the woman bit his wrist with all her strength. My brother screamed, slapped her several times in anger, and said, "You dare to bite me? You monster, it's your blessing to be favored by me." After saying that, he seemed to have thought of something, and said to his friend next to him, "Bring a pair of pliers." Soon, there was a heart-wrenching scream from the other end of the well, and the woman's teeth were pulled out. Looking at them queuing up to enjoy, I couldn't tell who was the monster. While my brother went to sleep, I hurried out and returned to the well. The woman was thrown aside at this moment, her face covered with blood. "Water, water," she murmured with her eyes closed. "So she can speak?" I quickly took a bucket of water from the well and put the woman in it. Like a fish swimming ashore, she slowly regained consciousness when she returned to the water. "Are you a human or a ghost?" I couldn't help but sigh at the beautiful woman in front of me. She didn't answer my question, but just looked straight into my eyes. "You saved me, I can fulfill one of your wishes, no matter what." I was stunned and murmured, "Is it possible to do anything?" The woman nodded, her charming eyes seemed to be able to eat people's hearts. I pondered for a long time, then leaned over and whispered a few words in her ear. She was not surprised, as if she had expected it, and said, "Everything will be as you wish." The stinky girl didn't get up yet. My father opened my quilt, pulled my hair, and dragged me to the ground. "Your brother and I are starving to death, hurry up and cook." I took a deep breath and dragged my tired body to scoop rice. After a while, I heard a commotion outside. "Zhangxing, tell me the truth, are you hooking up with this goblin?" Aunt Zhang next door was angrily pointing at the woman in the well and questioning Uncle Zhang. "Absolutely not, you misunderstood, how could I like her when she is like this? I am not that bad." As soon as this was said, a trace of guilt appeared on my brother's face. Aunt Zhang picked up the woman from the well and threw her to the ground. "Then prove to me that you have nothing to do with this goblin." Uncle Zhang hesitated for a while, then picked up the stick next to him and hit the woman hard a few times. Aunt Zhang's expression eased a lot, then he said, "This woman is basically a goblin who seduces people. If she stays here, she will definitely harm the whole village." "Yes, and because of her presence, we can only run to the mountains to fetch water these days. I am afraid that this well will be stinky because of her." Another big sister in the village echoed. At this time, the woman on the ground suddenly laughed, and her seaweed-like hair covered the woman's face, revealing only a bright red lip. Chuckling. The laughter was extremely weird, and I couldn't help but get goosebumps all over my body. "In the past few nights, countless people have come to see me. You should be the only ones who know what they did. Do you want me to read out their names one by one?" As soon as these words came out, the surroundings fell into a dead silence. They didn't expect that this woman could actually speak. "What are you talking about, stinky woman?" My brother rushed forward and kicked her in the face. "She is clearly bewitching people." "Yes, who knows what kind of monster this thing of unknown origin is. Throw her out of the village quickly." Several men echoed. "Throw? I'm afraid you have to kill her." Aunt Zhang narrowed her eyes and looked indifferent. "The harder she beats, the more she can prove that she is innocent with this monster." A man said weakly, "This is not good, right? You are not really confused by this woman, are you? If your mother knew that her son was with the monster, she would jump into the river. What are you talking about? My father sighed and interrupted their speeches. He took a butcher knife from home, walked to the woman and said, "I'm sorry, I'm doing this for the good of the village." The next second, the knife stabbed into the woman's back fiercely. The men lined up and stabbed holes in the woman's body one by one, as if to prove that they had done nothing. My brother's expression was a bit regretful, but he still took the knife and stabbed it into the woman's eyes fiercely. The screams echoed in my ears again and again, but I was powerless. When I looked into the woman's other eye, she suddenly smiled, as if telling me that my wish would come true soon. The woman died, and her body lay quietly there. Everyone applauded, except for Granny Lou, who was standing in the distance. According to the villagers, Granny Lou was a witch who could see ghosts. Because she dealt with ghosts all year round, she was so gloomy that people were afraid. Although she was responsible for settling all the strange things that happened in the village in the early years, people were always afraid of unknown things, so no villager dared to approach her, especially after her daughter died. The older generation said that she was possessed by a ghost and killed her daughter. Since then, the villagers have treated her like a plague god and hide when they see her. But only I know how good she is. I am afraid she is the only person in the whole village who is really good to me. It's going to change. She closed her eyes and trembled all over. I quickly held her hand and worriedly said, "Are you okay, Granny Lou?" She looked at me straight and said something that scared me, "Run away, Yunyan, the farther you run, the better. There will be no living breath in this village soon." My father shouted at me from a distance, "Jiang Yunyan, go and deal with the body." In order not to be beaten, I had to put the woman in a sack and dragged her to the back mountain to bury her. "Wait a minute, give me the woman." My brother's voice came from behind me. I squeezed the sack tightly and had a bad premonition. "Don't worry about it. Do you believe that you will be the next one to be buried? If a person like Jiang Gang goes crazy, he can do anything." I had no choice but to hand the sack to him. He took the woman out, his eyes full of pity. "Tsk, such a beautiful woman is dead." Then he pulled out a knife from his back and chopped straight at the woman. "You? Could it be?" I covered my mouth and looked at him in shock. After working for a long time, my brother put the woman's head into a bag. Then he threatened me fiercely and said, "If you dare to tell anyone about what happened today, you will die, understand?" I nodded and didn't say anything. I could guess why he did this. Sometimes people are more like monsters than monsters. The next day, something strange happened. The people in the village were covered with fish scales all over their bodies. When the scales were peeled off, they were full of wet juice. The fishy smell of fish spread throughout the village. And the well that always had water was now filled with dead fish of all sizes. My father saw that I was fine, dragged me to the ground and yelled, "Did you poison the whole village? Why are you the only one who doesn't have this strange thing? Tell me." I cried in pain and said, "I don't have it." Everyone looked at me covetously, as if they would eat me up in the next second. I shouted, "It was that woman, it must be that woman who cursed you." My father seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly knelt down at the feet of the richest landlord in the village, Zhao, and said, "Don't you know the Master Zhang in the temple? Invite him down to save everyone." Landlord Zhao was also very anxious, so he went up the mountain to invite the retired master down. Soon, a monk in a cassock came to the village. He looked around and then said in shock, "You are clearly haunted by the fish mother." "Fish mother? What is a fish mother?" The monk sighed and said, "Tell me the truth, has a woman died in the village recently?" My father was shocked and nodded in panic. "That woman was sent down from heaven to protect the fish mother in the village, but you killed her. What a sin!" As soon as these words came out, the whole village looked ashen. "But, there is a solution." Landlord Zhao scratched the fish scales on his body, which were extremely itchy, and his body was already covered with blood. "Master, please save everyone. I will agree to whatever you want." The monk closed his eyes and spoke slowly, If you want to resolve the resentment, you have to find the root of the resentment. Who is the mastermind who killed the fish mother? Everyone looked at each other, not daring to speak. At this time, I don't know who said that it was Aunt Zhang who said that she wanted to kill Yu's mother. As soon as this was said, all the men around began to echo, yes, yes, it's that bad woman. I said not to kill her, but she really harmed the whole village. Aunt Zhang was frightened and fell to the ground. The monk looked at Aunt Zhang and curled his lips and said, prepare 4 strong bulls to tie her hands and feet, and execute her immediately at noon. I was shocked. This is clearly to make Aunt Zhang the next fish mother. After a while, Aunt Zhang was tied up by everyone, and Uncle Zhang was anxiously shouting beside him, but no one paid attention to him. At that time, I said to kill that woman, and you all agreed, but now you put everything on my head. When the villagers heard this, they all turned their heads away. Seeing this, my father quickly stuffed a rag into Aunt Zhang's mouth. Several big men brought 4 cows from a distance and tied Aunt Zhang's hands and feet to the cows with ropes. Uncle Zhang knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. My God, you are going to let her die. My brother kicked him hard and said, shut up. Didn't you hear the master's words? Have you forgotten what you did to the fish mother? Upon hearing this, Uncle Zhang immediately shut up and knelt aside with a dull look. The monk walked slowly to the front of Aunt Zhang, looking at her struggling with an indifferent face. He picked up the Buddhist beads and chanted a mantra. After a while, he shouted to the sky, it's noon, execution. Several big men hit the cows with sticks, and the injured strong cows were scared and fled everywhere. Aunt Zhang kept making whining sounds, but no one saved her. With a click, her legs and arms were torn off, and blood instantly splashed onto the faces of the villagers. I touched my face, feeling indescribable fear in my heart. The cold eyes of the villagers around me seemed to be looking at an insignificant animal instead of a person. The monk wiped the Buddhist beads with his sleeves, closed his eyes and began to chant, Fish Mother Goddess, we have offered you the bodies of sinners, and we hope you will be magnanimous and let these kind villagers live. As soon as the words were finished, countless white maggots began to emerge from the scales on Aunt Zhang's body, and soon the torso was eaten clean by the worms, leaving only bones. And at this moment, someone next to him shouted, the scales on the body disappeared, we are saved. It was magical, as if it was really a divine appearance, and the villager's skin gradually got better. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master. My father knelt in front of the monk and kowtowed several times, and several villagers also knelt down to the monk one after another. The monk looked at the landlord Zhao and slowly said, don't forget what you promised me. When the landlord Zhao heard this, he immediately put on a weird expression and replied, of course, I will do it. That night, the whole village held a celebration banquet, and the white bones that had been gnawed clean were thrown into the furnace mercilessly. But no one would have thought that the monk would die by the well the next day, with no limbs, covered with fish scales, and a penis stuffed in his mouth. Under him lay a naked male corpse with traces of all sizes. I recognized it at a glance. This was one of my brother's good brothers. It's not difficult to guess that this man was chosen by the landlord Zhao and given to the monk as a pet. After the monk died, everyone was scared out of their wits. My brother swallowed his saliva and inexplicably began to look at his arms. I noticed that the scales were slowly growing again. What to do? It must be that the mother fish's resentment could not be resolved and killed the master. Landlord Zhao was chewing his fingers and walking around anxiously. My dad was scratching his face, and the scales kept falling down like dandruff, and he didn't stop until his face was covered with blood. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he rushed over and grabbed my hair and said, I don't believe that the fish mother will be merciful and let you go. Explain to me clearly, otherwise you will be sent down to accompany your mother tonight. He punched and kicked me again and again, but the villagers around him seemed to be accustomed to it and watched the farce in front of them coldly. Granny Lu hunched her back and staggered out from a distance and said, don't hit it. It's not just Yin Yin. I don't have this strange disease. It was the Buddha pendant I gave her that protected her. I was stunned and reached out to touch the pendant on my neck. This was something Granny Lu gave me a few years ago, saying that it could save my life at a critical moment. I thought it was really the fish mother who let me live, but I didn't expect that it was Granny Lou who saved me. My dad let go of the hand that was pulling my hair and finally calmed down. Most of the villagers were a little afraid of Granny Lou. They always felt that the witch in front of them would do something that was against the will of heaven and earth, so almost no one would take the initiative to find her. My dad cleared his phlegm and said carefully, "Granny Lou, if you can save my daughter, then other villagers should be able to save her too, right? I know you have boundless magical powers and a kind heart. You will definitely help us find a way, right?" Granny Lou sighed, took my hand, and said softly, "Where did you bury the fish mother? Take me to see it." I was frightened and broke into a cold sweat. Yunmu was now only half of her body. When they saw the body, wouldn't my brother be exposed? "You stinky girl, hurry up and tell me." There was no other way, so I had to take everyone up the mountain. Several villagers jointly dug up the grave. The moment I saw the body, I was almost paralyzed on the spot. The head that my brother had hidden was actually intact and returned, and the beautiful face seemed to be able to capture people's hearts. What was even more strange was that the originally incomplete body actually grew complete limbs, and all the injuries on the body disappeared completely. My brother was trembling with fear, and his face was extremely terrible. Granny Lou stared at the corpse with a heavy face and said, "Help me prepare a bowl of chicken blood and a basin of fresh fish." My father immediately asked someone to do it after hearing it. Granny Lou went home to get the things needed for the ceremony. I followed her with a very depressed expression. She stopped and turned around to look at me and asked, "What's wrong, is Yin Yan unhappy?" I lowered my head and said with a very sad expression, "Granny Lou, why did you save them? You know how bad those people are. They usually do a lot of evil. Isn't it good for them all to die?" I finally said my true feelings. I hope all of them will die tragically in this village. 3 years ago, I was bullied by the son of the landlord Zhao. I desperately called for help and struggled with all my strength, but what I got in return was more unscrupulous torture. When I walked down the mountain with scars all over my body, I found that the group of villagers were already waiting at the foot of the mountain. Everyone whispered, and those pairs of eyes seemed to be saying that I took the initiative to find the landlord's son. All of them knew what had just happened, but no one came to save me, including my father and my brother. "I want to call the police." As soon as I said this, my father's fist fell down. "It's your blessing that the son of the Zhao family can like you, but you dare to call the police. Everyone knows that you took the initiative, just like your mother." This sentence instantly reminded me of the poor woman who was beaten to death. When I was young, the landlord Zhao took a fancy to my mother and forced her to commit crimes, but she swore to die and tried to run back home. The final result was that the landlord Zhao's wife brought a group of people to prove that my mother was a bad woman and a shameless woman. That night, they beat my mother's thin body with sticks again and again until she died completely. No one pitied her, no one. Perhaps I still had a glimmer of luck. After I ran away from home, I went door to door to ask the villagers to help me testify. I thought at least one person would help me, but no one did. The son of the landlord Zhao threw several stacks of money on the ground and said with disdain, "Stop while you are ahead, no one in this village will stand on your side." I don't know if it was God's pity on me or the retribution came too quickly. The son of the Zhao family suddenly had a heart attack and bit all the dogs in the family to death. In the end, he used a knife to cut open his belly and pulled out all those things. The landlord Zhao's family was in great pain, but in order to continue the incense, they had to look for ways to continue to have a boy. After a long time, they finally got pregnant with the second child a few months ago. Granny Lou in front of me sighed, touched my head and said, "Yun Yan, I know you hate them, but this is so many lives after all. When this matter is over smoothly, Granny will take you away from this village and never come back." My pupils lit up and asked, "Really?" Granny Lou nodded. "Ever since my Kingwazi died unexpectedly, you often come to take care of Granny. I know you are afraid that I will do something stupid. Granny sees all these thoughts. From then on, I regarded you as my second granddaughter, so I will definitely take you away." Tears soaked my eyes, and I hugged her with emotion. In this terrible village, the only person who was kind to me was Granny Lou. At night, Granny Lou soaked 2 ropes tied with bells and chicken blood and tied them to her hands and feet. Then she used a knife to cut open her belly and stuff the fishes into it. When the belly of the fish mother was getting bigger and bigger, Granny Lou cut open her palm and squeezed out blood and dripped it on it. The magical thing was that the place cut by the sharp blade healed very quickly. She raised the bell and circled around the corpse, singing a song that I couldn't understand. Suddenly, the woman opened her eyes and made a terrible cry. The surrounding villagers were all so scared that they dared not move. Granny Lou shouted to everyone, "Don't look her in the eye." The others quickly closed their eyes, fearing that the fish mother would rush over and kill them at this moment. Soon, the heart-wrenching screams stopped. Granny Lou took a deep breath and said to everyone, "Someone needs to be here tonight to guard the fish mother. Don't make any mistakes. If you get through tonight smoothly, her resentment will be resolved and everyone's strange diseases will be cured. Remember not to untie the bell on her body. Once the bell is broken, the fish mother will turn into a fierce ghost and take the lives of the whole village." Hearing this, my father quickly pushed me out and said, "You are the only one who is fine in the village except Granny Lou. Of course, you will guard the body of the fish mother." I was shocked and quickly stepped back a few steps and asked, "What if I am killed by her?" As soon as I finished speaking, my father grabbed my neck and said, "If you guard it to death, it will also contribute to the village. You should be happy." Granny Lou grabbed my father's hand and said with an unhappy face, "If something happens to Yun Yin, I will not help you again." My father let go of my neck in a bad mood and stopped talking. Granny Lou put her hand on my shoulder and said kindly, "Don't worry, child. As long as the bell is not untied, the fish mother can't hurt anyone. Remember, don't trust anyone except me, understand?" I nodded and kept Granny Lou's words in my heart. Late at night, I sat beside the fish mother, looking at her tied hands and feet and bulging belly, and I felt a sudden pain in my heart. She would be tortured like this even if she died. Suddenly, I heard a sound of footsteps. "Who is it?" A white shadow appeared in front of me. It was a man I had never seen before. He seemed to be wearing clothes that looked like Taoist robes. "What are you doing here?" He looked down at me with his arms folded. I didn't dare to tell him the secret of the village, so I responded with silence. "This ritual is quite cruel. It is simply to make the fish mother never reincarnate." I asked him, "Who are you?" "I saw a circle of black air covering the top of your village. I guessed that there might be something wrong, so I came to find out." I sighed and pointed at the woman. "It must be because of her. Why don't you give me this body?" I thought he was a bit weird and I was too lazy to deal with him. Suddenly, he seemed to be blinded by a light. He squatted down and snatched the pendant from my neck and asked, "Who gave you this thing?" I was so anxious that I quickly snatched it back. "What does it have to do with you?" "This thing is a very evil thing, it can suck your yang energy." I was a little angry and cursed, "Nonsense, there is a Buddha on it, how can it be evil? Didn't you find that the Buddha on it has no hands? The Buddha with a broken hand is poured into the blood of the dead, which is against the will of heaven." I took a closer look at the pendant with the light of the kerosene lamp in my hand, and found that there was a layer of light red blood inside it, and the Buddha on it really had no hands. But why did Granny Lou do this? She is so good to me on weekdays, there is no reason to scare me to death. Besides, yesterday, she told me not to trust anyone. Could this be a problem? I came here to save all of you villagers. This ritual can't break the curse of your village at all. I walked to the body of the fish mother, half believing and half doubting, took off all the bells on her body and threw them aside. "Tell me, how do you want to save her?" The next morning, the villagers went up the mountain. Granny Lou saw the bells thrown everywhere, and she was so scared that she almost couldn't stand still, and the body had disappeared long ago. The only one lying in the cave was me, who was knocked unconscious. When I opened my eyes, I was already lying in Granny Lou's house. She wiped the sweat off my face with a towel and asked, softly, "Yun Yin, what's going on?" I described the scene in the middle of the night with a horrified face. A Taoist priest attacked me and let the fish mother go. Granny Lu's expression was very angry, and she tightly grasped the towel in her hand. This is unreasonable. I will never let that Taoist priest go. Granny Lu, what should we do now? Will the people in the village? As soon as the voice fell, there was a scream outside. My brother rushed out of the house covered in blood. Save me, please save me quickly. He screamed in pain, but no one rushed to help him. He couldn't bear the pain and pulled out his hair and scales. The precious thing covered with fish scales also fell off. I walked up and carried him on my back and took him home. Brother, bear with it, I will call a doctor for you immediately. His face was already full of tears from the pain, and he held my hand tightly. Thank you, sister. You are still the best to me. What are you thanking me for? You are my dear brother. If I don't save you, who will save you? I curled my lips and walked into the kitchen, selected the sharpest knife and locked the door. When I came with the knife, my brother was so scared that he fell directly from the bed. You. What do you want to do? I touched the blade gently, smiling. Brother, don't you want to cure your illness? Shave off the fish scales and your illness will be cured. I grabbed his head and slammed it to the ground, then raised the knife and stabbed it into the flesh, like a fish on a chopping board. My brother kept begging me, but unfortunately he had no strength left. With a heart-wrenching scream, the fish scales were shaved off piece by piece. Don't worry, you won't die for the time being, and there will be a group of people to accompany you. After saying that, I pretended to be scared and ran out. Help. The fish mother is back, she killed my brother. When the villagers heard this, they were so scared that they ran back home and locked the door. After all, they were afraid that they would be the next one. In the evening, I hid in Granny Lu's room. I held her hand and begged, Granny Lu, please save me, I really don't want to die. Yun Yan, don't worry, I will protect you even if I risk my life. Looking at the old man's sincere eyes, I suddenly felt guilty and sad that I had doubted Granny Lu. In order to save the situation, I told Granny Lu the truth. Granny Lu, the Taoist priest said that the pendant you gave me was an evil thing. What's going on? The old man widened his eyes, his face full of disbelief. How is this possible? Yun Yan's broken hand Buddha is a family heirloom of my family from generation to generation. My heart's blood was added to it, so I can protect you from the curse of the fish mother. I suddenly realized that I was really deceived by the Taoist priest. I started to cry loudly. What's wrong, Yun Yan, why are you crying? I told the truth in detail. What should I do to save all this? Please don't abandon me because of this, you are the only one in the world who treats me well. Granny Lu was stunned, then looked at me with a wry smile and said, Silly child, how could I abandon you? Even if you do something wrong, you will always be my favorite child. I will definitely let you live well. As she said that, she took out a jade curved knife from the house. This thing was a treasure that my mother gave me before she died. She protected me all my life. With it, no demons or monsters can get close to me. If I insert it into the heart of the fish mother, it can cause her great loss of vitality. Taking this opportunity, I can completely lock her soul and let her be exiled to the three realms forever. My expression was a little worried. But how can we get close to her? Granny Lu smiled and looked at me. This requires your cooperation, Yun Yan. Everything can still be saved. Granny Lu wrote talismans all over my body with black ink, and then placed a circle of candles on the ground, and tied a circle of ropes tied with bells around my body. I was a little scared and asked cautiously, Granny Lu, is this really useful? Granny Lu answered while busying her hands, you help the fish mother untie the bell, and a trace of her soul is left on you. A soul-calling ceremony can bring her over. I lit the smoke in the house in advance, so she wouldn't notice my presence. When the fish mother gets close, don't hesitate and stab her in the heart with a knife. I nodded and understood. Granny Lu shook the bell in her hand like she did yesterday. One after another, a gust of wind blew, and the candle went out. The whole house fell into terrible darkness. It was the fish mother who came. The woman was wearing a red dress and walked towards me barefoot. Granny Lu walked quietly behind me while shaking the bell. Once the knife pierced into the fish mother's chest, she could take action immediately, but why did I do this? Yun Yen, now. I curled my lips and knocked over the smoke next to me. Soon, Granny Lu's figure was exposed under the eyes of the fish mother. The woman immediately pinched her neck fiercely and pressed against the wall. 4. Why? I pulled off the pendant on my neck and threw it at her feet. Stop pretending, Granny Lu. I actually knew it a long time ago. I was just playing along with you. If you hadn't handed me the scimitar, the fish mother really couldn't get into your body. You want to use my body to revive your granddaughter? No way. As soon as these words came out, the old woman who had just had a kind face changed her face instantly. You stinky girl, my Chinger died to save you. What's wrong with paying her back with your life? Then she looked at the fish mother in front of her and said, if it weren't for you who have been protecting her these years, I would have succeeded long ago. It's all because of you that my granddaughter can't be resurrected. Under the ferocious expression, it was all Granny Lu's terrible obsession. I sneered and slowly said, do you know that your granddaughter committed suicide? Granny Lu had an unbelievable expression on her face. It was your granddaughter who was almost bullied. I saw the son of the Zhao family tied her up the mountain, so I followed her quietly. I risked my life to save her and let her escape down the mountain. I thought she would help me, but when I knocked on your door again and again, all I got was your white eyes and evasive eyes. Granny Lu spit on the ground. You are talking nonsense. It is obviously the boy you took the initiative to hook up with. What does it have to do with my granddaughter? I sat on the ground and continued to tell my story carelessly. 1 month after that incident, I wanted to commit suicide, so I jumped into the river. I thought I was dead, but your granddaughter saved me. When I got ashore, I was thinking of pulling her up, but she shook my hand off without a struggle. The last words she said to me were, I'm sorry. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe she didn't want to live anymore. The last look in the girl's eyes was only a deep despair for the world. After hearing this, Granny Lu burst into tears, repeating, you lied to me, it's impossible, how could my granddaughter commit suicide, it must be you. After saying that, she inserted the hairpin on her head into the hand of the fish mother. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she immediately rushed towards me, and the next second a pair of hands pierced her heart, and fish scales instantly covered her whole body. No. Impossible, I haven't seen my granddaughter yet. Before she finished speaking, she fell down. Everything should be over, right? You Mu, just surrender and stop hurting people. The Taoist suddenly appeared in the house. Last night, he told me that Yumu was a demon who had cultivated into a human form. Even if her physical body was killed, she would soon be resurrected and grow a new body. She should be kind by nature, but she inexplicably went astray. After catching Yumu, he would take her back to the Taoist temple and have her purified by his masters. He could not accept the cruel spell that Granny Lu cast on Yumu, and would rather let me let her go. So he was a very kind person. Yumu stepped back, as if she had been betrayed, staring at me and the mirror in my hand. The Taoist said that if he met Yumu who had resurrected, he would drip blood from his fingertips on the mirror, and he would come over immediately. I will not kill you, but just take you back to the Taoist temple. These villagers are all innocent, and you should not harm them. Yumu wanted to take this opportunity to escape, but the Taoist immediately put talismans on all the doors of the room, and the woman could not escape anyway. He took out a string of beads and threw it hard at the fish mother. She couldn't resist and fell to the ground instantly. Stop struggling. This is not the place for you, he said, holding the golden bowl in his right hand, raising the sword in his left hand, and chanting a spell. I took this opportunity to move behind him step by step, pulled out the scimitar hidden in my sleeve, and stabbed it in. The Taoist priest didn't react and fell straight down. He was very angry and couldn't speak. I made a grimace. I'm sorry, this thing has little effect on people, you will be injured at most. Don't think about catching the fish mother anymore. Even if I chase you to the ends of the earth, I will stop you. Once the Taoist priest was injured, the spells of the talisman on the door were all invalid. The fish mother looked at me with burning eyes, I nodded at her, and soon the woman ran away. Why? Don't you want to save this village? I couldn't help laughing out loud. But didn't you say that my mother is kind by nature, and will repay kindness, and will never take the initiative to kill? What if the person she wants to repay is me? I squatted down and patted the ashes on the Taoist priest's body. Do you know what my wish was to her? The Taoist priest finally reacted, stared at me with wide eyes, and asked, "Kill the whole village?" The man in front of me fainted before he could finish his words. I threw the mirror aside with an expressionless face and walked out of the door with a swagger. The fish mother kept her promise. The villagers were like crazy at this moment, scratching their scales vigorously. It seemed that someone told them that the disease would be cured if the scales fell off. What's more, they started to scrape the skin on their bodies with knives until they could see the bones. I walked to my father and squatted down. He was lying on the ground with blood all over his body, and he kept muttering, "Save me, save me." But who will save you? It started to rain, and the heart-wrenching screams gradually disappeared in the water. I looked up and found that the fish mother was looking at me from a distance. She stood in the rain and looked as beautiful as a little red fish. Suddenly, a memory flashed in my mind, and I smiled with relief. I waved to the little red fish, saying over and over again, "Thank you." When I packed all my luggage and planned where to go next, the Taoist priest came to my side with his back covered. I was a little embarrassed and asked softly, "Is the wound not serious?" The Taoist priest rolled his eyes at me. "What do you think? A hypocrite who talks about humanitarianism all the time." When I was about to go my separate ways with him, he grabbed my bag. "Are you interested in going up the mountain?" "What do you mean?" I said, "To our Taoist temple. You are less than 20 years old and you don't have much money. Where can you go? You don't want to drag me back and kill me? How is it possible? We will never kill, and you only need to sweep the fallen leaves at the door, and I can teach you some Taoist magic." "And what is your name?" "Jiang Yunyan. What about you?" "Qing Feng." "Okay, Taoist Qing Feng, look over there, there is a monster over there." Where? As he said that, he took out his sword. I quickly slipped away when he was not paying attention. It is better to rely on yourself than on others. How can I be sure that the Taoist temple will not be another nightmare? I can't afford to gamble, and I don't want to gamble. After leaving the village, I seemed to see the sun again. For the first time, I felt that the sun was so beautiful. I looked down and found that the little red fish in the river had been following me for a long time. No need to send it off. I will live well in the future. Extra. I am the descendant of the fish mother. When I was still a little red fish, I fell from the demon world because of playing secretly. When I opened my eyes, I was already in the human world. Maybe my color was too bright. I was caught by a group of children and tortured hard on the shore. I thought I was about to die. "Don't hurt her." Suddenly, a dirty girl shouted at them with a stick. Unfortunately, she seemed to have no strength, and the group of dead children knocked her to the ground in a few strokes, but even so, she did not run away. She rushed over to protect me tightly, and I was able to escape because of this. Since then, I often come to this village to see her. I didn't know that someone could live so miserably. But with my current ability, I can't save her at all. So I practiced desperately, trying to transform into a human form. The first revenge was on the man who raped her. At that time, my demon power had been cultivated to be strong enough, and I could immediately transform into a human form. Humans are so fragile. I just cast a spell and let the man die tragically on the spot. Later, I was finally able to transform into a human form, but there was a mistake in the process, and I couldn't grow hands and feet. But it didn't matter. Soon I was able to grow a body again. I finally talked to the benefactor I had always missed. I also witnessed how terrible this village was. She told me her wish, so I would not hesitate to use up all my magic power for her. I succeeded, I saved her. I know that she can finally live the life she wants. I also know that we will never meet again. The end.